So, ladies and gentlemen, I would love to welcome a person who's carrying with himself the whole wellness with him, with his energy, body energy, and the aura what he creates. So, over to you, Sandeep. Thank you so much for joining Brainciti.
Thank you, Nidhi. Thank you all for joining today. Happy Dasera, everybody. It's so nice that you decided to make time on this festive evening to be together and let the festival begin. Well, today I thought since we are a small group, let's keep it interactive. So sorry you guys were watching this later on YouTube. Happy Dashera and the festive season anyway. But it's great that you guys are here because what we're going to do is I'm thinking I'll just take you through a few concepts. Yeah. And then we can actually use this R to see how these concepts apply to you. And as a matter of fact, not just apply to you, but apply to anybody because uh, they're internalizable, let's say. Yeah. So we'll figure out how they are internalizable, how this whole thing about well-being can become something that you can implement in your organizations, your client organizations, and in yourselves, most importantly. So as the topic says, we're talking about the renewal of people and organizations in the pandemic. And there is a lot that's happened with the pandemic, which we're going to start unraveling. But first, we will unravel 5 concepts, and then I'm going to guide an interaction. So, shall we start? When we interact,
Yes,
you're
we all
welcome.
are set to start.
Thank you.
So, can we
That's
have
exactly
thumbs
what I
up
was
or
thinking.
any reaction for Sandeep? Yes. Thank you so much, guys. Thanks a lot.
Love that interactivity. I was just about to say that I expect you guys to just unmute and talk because it's like on the Shara evening we're sitting around the puja pandal and having a chat. So let's have the chat around these concepts. Yeah. So let's bring on the concepts. And to do that, the first one I'd like to talk about is the concept of impermanence. Long word, I know. But the reason why impermanence is important is because it was 2,500 years ago that this word actually came about by the Buddha himself. He's the one who first talked about it. He was the one who, in fact, established that there is nothing permanent in the world. And there is a lot of intellectual debate and philosophy that made this happen. And finally, what Buddhist precepts say, the first seal of Buddhism, so to say, is that nothing in the world lasts. Now, likewise, the pandemic does not last, right? And if you look at it, it's only because we think that things will last that we have so much to do about them. We have so much to plan. We think that we are going to last 70, 80, 100 years, and so we have to do so many things about it. We think that our companies are going to last, like the book Built to Last. It really glorified the idea of things lasting. But the truth is that because everything is made of multiple things, the whole concept of interdependence, nothing lasts because everything decomposes, decays, and fragments. So it's not that we have a kind of panacea for uh, for things to last. And why worry? Now, if you look at the depth of this one word itself, there is nothing to worry when we know that everything's going to go away. So why stress over it? Why this anxiety? I mean, in my home slide, the previous one, I was talking about imagining a world without stress because I'm going to crusade against stress. Why stress? If you can understand that nothing will last, so do whatever you have to do about whatever you have to do now. That's kind of what the Buddha started talking about. right? The presence in the moment, in the now. Don't be in the past. Don't be in the future. Be here. And whatever you do here is what is going to be of significance as you build the future. So how have we internalized this sort of a thing, this concept? How have we really internalized it for our own lives and for the lives of or for the life of our company or for the lives of our team members? Those are the kind of things that we want to understand, because the pandemic has given us an opportunity to want to really understand. It has told us that industries which we thought were like uh, forever here, like real estate, it's that whole bubble around real estate is probably going to be, I mean, may not even be a bubble. It might just go away like a fax machine. Nobody talks about them, nobody sees them anymore, right? Because everybody is telecommuting, everybody is living in the hills, everybody is doing what makes it most convenient to interact, which is what HR has to start thinking of, has to move into, to see how interactions are paramount and not the physical presence in spaces. Now, would telecommuting have ever come about at the speed at which it has come if it weren't for the pandemic? Perhaps not, right? So, what we have to see here is that there are many things, including stuff like schooling. Now, it is very stressful when schooling, and I'm talking specifically about schooling because I'm looking at the entire spectrum from our offices and work-life balances to our kids. Now, our kids, their teachers, our own selves as parents, we got so stressed because we were not prepared for suddenly schools to not need to exist, right? And what do you do with that building over there? Or everything can be done remotely. The teachers were not prepared. There was no bandwidth, there was no Wi-Fi, there was no laptops in many cases, and so there was so much stress. But if we apply ourselves into designing systems with the purpose of having distributed education, it can become a lot more meaningful and a lot less stressful. Think about it. So, what is the purpose behind education? What is the purpose behind the interaction in an office environment? What is the purpose behind the meetings that we have, behind the reports that we submit, behind the projects that we complete? Somewhere we lose this purpose because we think that it is always going to be there, it is always permanently there. I'll give you an example. There was this girl who was recently married, and she was in the kitchen. Had this nice huge frying pan, and she had this nice large steak. And I talk of steaks because uh, most of you are from Dubai, and that's where you get really good stuff out there. Personally, I'm a vegetarian, but that's besides the point. So she had this big loaf of steak, okay, and her husband saw that she chopped off the four corners and then placed it on the frying pan. And then, whatever was happening, the fats were burning and it was the aroma. Oh boy. The husband asked, "Tell me something. This looks like it's cooking really well, but why did you chop off those four edges?" And she said, "I did it because my mom does that." So, recently married, she is just doing what she saw her mom doing. So they were curious. So they decided, let's call up mom. And they called up mom. And she asked, "Mom, why do you cut the edges of the steak, those four corners, before frying it?" And mom thought and thought, says, "Well, actually, you remember we used to have a dog, I used to feed that to the dog." So the girl said, "Yeah, but then when you fed it to the dog, you used to cook it for the dog, those four pieces by themselves later." And if you had to cook it again, then why didn't you just cook the whole thing and then chop pieces and give it to the dog? Mother says, Don't know. Maybe I just saw my mother doing that. So now it was becoming a very serious story, what's going on here. And so they decided that they must get grandmom on the con call. And so Zoom to the rescue. Grandmom, why did you chop those corners of the steak? And grandmom thought, yeah, I used to chop the corners of the steak when I used to cook. Yeah, that's because I had a small frying pan, no? So the corners didn't fit. She had cut the corners, the steak would fit in the frying pan and then it would cook. Now, the purpose of cutting those corners and then maybe cooking the corners for the dog later in the second generation, that purpose was actually because the frying pan was small. Now, mom's frying pan was not small. Daughter's frying pan is really huge. But because we have lost sight of the impermanence of the purpose and the frying pan itself, it's gone. No small frying pans anymore. We have started doing things and considering them the way to do it and justifying that that's the way because we have a dog and the dog has to be given bits and therefore we cut the bits. So we have a reason to back up everything because we're not renewing our thinking. We're not thinking of what is relevant to this frying pan, what is relevant to this family and its needs for steaks with or without dogs. Think about it. Like I said, for those of you who came in late, I'm going to introduce 5 concepts here. We just started on the first one on impermanence. And then I'm going to invite all of us to have the Shara talk kind of thing and understand how these apply to us. So in the process of understanding and just recapping the concepts here, I'd like you guys to just write down this word pan because we'll come back to this word pan and how it relates with purpose and all that will obviously come back to your mind. Right? Does that sound like a plan? So if that is good, shall we move to the second word? And that second word again comes from the Buddha. It is mindfulness. The word mindfulness is not a new fad. It's got some acceptance in corporate life today, and a lot of people seem to want to do workshops on mindfulness and stuff like that. But 2,500 years back, the Buddha actually he gave you 4 foundations and 16 steps to liberation through this. Okay, so this is no small deal. You can actually use mindfulness to get liberated. But that's not what we're going to do now. what you may have noticed during this pandemic is that you and everybody around you has become a little more mindful about small things like wearing masks. Now, for those of you who are really wondering whether that's the right word, mindfulness, essentially what it means is to remember. That's all. Nothing more than that. Nothing like being in the now, moment to moment awareness and all those fancy jargons that you'll find in Google. It is just to remember. To remember what? To remember what you're doing. Right? So if you remember, this is what I'm doing and this is why I'm doing it, then you are mindful of that. Now, you remember you have this thing on top of a low ceiling or on a staircase which says mind your head, right? So that's exactly it. Mind your head means remember your head. Remember that you have a head. And the rest goes without saying because if you're a person with average intelligence, you'll probably figure that if I remember I have a head, it's probably going to hit this low ceiling. I don't want my head to get hit. So I must duck. Simple, right? So that's, and then Rajinikanth, a good old Rajinikanth comes to the rescue all the time. He says, mind it. Mind it means you remember I'm Rajinikanth. Okay, don't forget. Otherwise, you got problems. So that's mindfulness. Now, mindfulness applies itself, or we can apply it to all three levels at which we exist. What are the three levels at which we exist? We exist
Body, mind,
at
and
the level.
spirit.
Say that again, Professor.
Body, mind, and spirit, all three levels.
I love you. Absolutely. Body, mind, and spirit. Totally. So let's pack this in, because this is a session supposedly on health, and I'm talking about renewal, which is of course where everything comes in. But let's, people say I didn't get any practical tips on health and all that. So I go back to like Nidhi said, the corporate world. I spent about 20 years over there, but somewhere during the later part, I started getting kind of disturbed by what that was doing to our health, for example, among other things, both physical and mental health. I was consulting to clients like Pepsi, who said that you just put something out of a packet into your mouth and you'll be fine. And to Genpact, who said that you can work all night and everything will be good against the biorhythm, and you can work absolutely like an automaton and you'll be totally set in life, because you're getting that pay packet. I didn't kind of buy those things. So I got answers from Vedic wisdom, Tibetan lamas. I spent time in the Himalayas and monasteries with uh, lamas, and then with the Oriental masters from China and Japan. And that's led to my bringing you a lot of ancient Oriental wisdom for health, leadership, productivity, and stuff like that. One of the things that I do workshops on is called Qi Gong, Qigong. Last week, if you were here, Deepak had a great session on Tai Chi, in which he mentioned that Qigong is the mother of Tai Chi. So Qigong is about connecting with this body, mind, and spirit. Yeah, and getting this body, mind, and spirit to align and work for you. Now, if you are mindful, that's the fundamental assumption that we're making here from all these ancient Oriental practices, that you've got to be aware of what is it that we are doing. Remember that. So if you're mindful that you're sitting on a computer for very long, whether or not you're mindful in your brain, in your logical mind, your body is mindful. So the mindfulness of the body, it tells you after a while to do this. Right? You feel good when sitting on the computer for a while, then you do this. Stretch up, whatever, right? Stretch left, stretch right. Why does it feel so good? It's a recommended practice. This is where the tip of the day is coming. Why does it feel good?
Because there's a change in body movement.
And why?
I think first we should do and then feel it.
Do it. Let's all do it. I know you guys have been sitting at the computer for at least half an hour. So
the blood circulation and all that.
Yeah.
And breathe. Breathe when you do these movements. Do it and see.
Feel relaxed.
Okay, so let's do 1, 2, 3. We all will do it with Sandeep. Yes.
Breathing out.
ये मुझे लग रहा है मैंने वर्ल्ड कप पकड़ लिया.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait.
When you're breathing, when you're doing stuff like this, what you're doing is you're changing the alignment within the body. You're changing the air that's reaching the capillaries. Like when you're sitting like this, hunched up over the computer, these capillaries are constricted in the lungs. Now, when you naturally feel like doing this, your body is mindful that I've got less air here, less chi, less energy. And by stretching these, you expand the energy here. By stretching the arms up, you expand the energy going into here. And then you bring them back on your laptop, on your keyboard, and continue. So doing these things with mind, with thinking, with remembering is even better, because then you take your half an hour, at least 1 hour breaks and do it.
Awareness.
You actually want to do this because you're doing it by the alarm. You can set an alarm. Why not? Set an alarm just so that you are always mindful that my body needs this. Now, when we come to at the mind level, there are vibrations, okay, which produce these angers and these happinesses and these fears. Anybody have fears over here? Everybody has. silly question, but
you're not dragging.
Everybody can
Not
dot
you.
their own fears. You want us to make us list?
my point is, we are in these emotions, in these vibrations, like zombies. They come, they go. We don't know where they are. We don't know how they come. We don't know how they go. But if we can practice remembering mindfulness with this, like I told you, he said it's all the way to liberation. At least we will get into awareness at a deeper level of how to change the mind. How to actually, at will, when we are angry, stop being angry. Switch on, switch off. I know I'm angry. Instead of saying something at that point and making a mess of my relationship, I can just recognize it there and say, oh, this is anger. Switch off. So what are we talking about? You change the complete dynamic of the room like that. You renew yourself and others. That's mindfulness at the mind level. And then, as Professor Saab said, the third level is the spirit level, which is the level at which we operate, we work along with purpose. And this is where our intuition comes from. This is where our energy comes from. This is where our gut feeling, that level of feedback works here. So let's say you got a business. Let's say you're in the business of pizzas. Okay. So when we're going to discuss this section, we're going to, like you had the word pan there, we'll have the word pizzas here. Now this business of pizzas, you find that the pandemic has come, lockdowns have come, and suddenly the cost of flour has gone up, the cost of vegetables has gone up, everything, transport, supply chain. Man, I can't be selling my pizzas at that price anymore. I'm going to shut my business. What are you focusing on? Where is your spirit driving you? It's driving you to factors that you cannot control. How can you change the price of the flour or the vegetable? You cannot. So instead of shutting down your business or upsetting your customers and then explaining to them, giving them that excuse like the dog, that this is why I'm doing this. If you change where your spirit is directed and directed at your customers who are in your control because they've been buying from you all the time, and give them additional value, give them additional services, find out exactly what more you can do to support them in the pandemic. Maybe you can change the way that you're delivering to them. Maybe what you deliver could be utilizing something where their washing needs go down because their maids aren't coming anymore and stuff like that. You would create customer delight. You would create happier customers who may be willing and happy to either buy more from you or pay more for whatever they buy, which are basically the two methods in which you can increase your top line. So it's about being mindful of what it is you can control, what it is that you can direct your energies and your intuitions towards. And it's not that suddenly this comes to a few people who are gifted. It's about training yourself through renewal of the possibilities that these things can be bringing up to you. So we're going to come back to discussing these things. Don't forget that one. But I'll go to the next concept of alignment. And I mentioned this in a bit earlier, where we're talking about how Qigong helps you align body, mind, and spirit. Now, when body, mind, and spirit are aligned, we are stress-free. You see, the body, it makes us do things, right? We act. The mind, it makes us say things that we think. And the spirit, it makes us feel things the way we are, we be. Our being is spirit. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. This is not my line. This is a lovely quote I read many decades ago. We're not human beings having a spiritual experience sometimes. We're spiritual beings having a human experience right now. So when our saying, our doing, and our being, which is a manifestation of saying, being, saying, being the mind, and doing being the body, and being the feelings, the spirit. When we are out of alignment of saying, doing, and being, we're stressed. You say something, you do something else. Very stressful. You do it because the client wants you to do it, or the boss wants you to do it, or somebody wants you to do it, and you are not able to say no. You're not able to go against that and keep your peace. That's why we lose our peace. Get it? So the crack to a stress-free world is by this alignment of saying, doing, and being. And if we are to look at an example to relate this to the corporate context, a lot of you are in HR. So let's look at what our HR people do when new people join the organization. Orientation program. We tell them about the purpose, the vision, mission, values, their KRAs, their job description, their reporting structure, stuff like that. Now, what we are essentially doing this and how we're designing this is we're designing it to have the same purpose being effected by the individual as is required of the organization as part of its vision. Because if the individual works at cross purposes to the organization, there will be organizational stress. If the individual works at cross purposes to the team, the JD, the reporting structures, there will be team stress. Anywhere that we are out of alignment, there is stress, right? So the whole purpose of having all this in alignment is so that we have a more efficient and a more effective and a more productive organization. And that's what we want to do from the get-go stage. And that's why we have this thing, we talk about these things. So the key word here, let's say, is going to be organization is too messy a word. Let's use the word stress, right? So alignment, stress. Now the fourth word is the most predictable of them, renewal, right? You see my book up there. That's well, you've got copies of that book all over. I'm not going to pull it out from behind the computer, or should I? It's a little far. Forget it. It looks exactly like this, and it's available in all leading portals, including especially on renewalism.com, where you can get a free copy. Okay, so that's my advertising portion of this. So do go over to renewalism.com. What is renewal? Renewal is about letting go of the past, envisioning the desired future, and acting in the present. When you act in the present, like we said right at the beginning, when you're talking about impermanence, and then continued with the concept of mindfulness, that what we're doing now will automatically design the future. Now, what we need to be doing is looking at how what we have done in the past without holding on to it, without holding on to the pan, we can let go, and keeping this stress-free way of arriving at the future in mind, renew our say, do, and be. Renew what we work on, how we think it over, and how we feel about it. So implementing this as part of this book, Renewal, is at three levels. At the level of the self, where predictably you get body, mind, and spirit in alignment. Then at the level of our relationships, which is what I call symbiotic renewal. And these relationships are relationships with the others, of course, with money, even with the environment and the planet. So when we relook at how we are working our thoughts, feelings, and actions in harmony, and doing the right thing at the moment, the appropriate thing at the moment, thinking through, renewing our thought process from the frying pan to the cutting of the corners, from asking ourselves, for example, why is it that I'm doing these four pieces for the dog separately instead of just doing them like automatons for years and years till our daughter finds out or rather asks us that, Mama, why did you do that? That's renewal. And renewal is a constant process. It's a constant process of addressing the earlier three concepts, which have to do with purpose, the purpose which we related to impermanence, the process which we related to mindfulness. If we don't remember what the process is and how we're going about it, then we're never going to get those pizzas in the way that serve our customers right. We may shut down our business. And alignment, which is about people, starts with alignment of body, mind, spirit, of developing a strong team, developing a strong self, developing our people in alignment, stress free, and then developing the people purpose process around our symbiotic relationships with them, the impact, the imprint of our company, the footprint of our company, the carbon footprint, and all those sort of things on the planet, and renewing why we do certain things. What are we doing? And you probably figure out the telecommuting is a very good option if you thought about that 5 years ago. If you were a Google, if you were a Twitter, you could have done that right there and established the way of working without real estate, right? And led a completely different movement, which would not backfire on you, because right now people are saying that Google and Twitter are announcing that they're going to be working from home for 3-5 years because it serves their online business propagation needs. But well, if you think of it earlier, then you won't be accused that you're doing it because it serves your needs. You're actually doing what serves your needs and helping the planet. Similar thing with online schooling, for example. And what both these are, telecommuting and online schooling, for example, are systems. So at the third level of renewal is the renewal of systems, because it is us who write policy. It's people, it's human beings, it's nobody else. And people are creating these systems in which we're trapping ourselves. Like grandma, she trapped herself in a small pan. She trapped 3 generations in a small pan. Right? So what are these systems? There's so many systems that we have been just doing, but we've been so busy doing that we've been busy being too busy to question. And systemic renewal is all about starting to question people who are in charge of policy, people who are in a position to make a difference. And that's what renewal and the renewalism movement really is about. And that's something that I'm completely devoted to. How it happens, and it happens not just for health, it happens for so many other things, which we will discuss now as soon as I finish with the fifth concept of habits, because it happens through habits. You want happens through habits? What does that mean? Well, renewal is not something that's happening to the whole planet as a coronavirus has happened. It's not a wave. Renewal is happening one person at a time, one policymaker at a time, one company at a time. It's thanks to the pandemic that we realize that there is a need, there's a business need being served by renewal. There is greater profitability that's going to arise because we align people, purpose, and processes. Processes. So there's going to be more productivity, more profitability. And we must thank the pandemic for nudging us in that direction. But it actually will all happen when individuals take cognizance that it is in their habits that renewal can actually start getting propagated. So the book Renewal is about habits for self-renewal, for symbiotic renewal, and for systemic renewal. Things that you can do. Your unexpected role in saving the planet. That's the byline of the book. And how is it that you can create habits? How is it that you can replace habits? And importantly, what a lot of people tend to think, I've discovered in my talks around the world, that a common belief, limiting belief, is that it's very difficult to change habits or create habits. Like I said, it's a limiting belief. It's extremely simple. And the book, of course, illustrates, explains, and handholds how you do that before getting into the habits itself. But I'll tell you some habits that you will be surprised yourself you created. And then when you read about those triggers that help create habits instantly, you will relate. There's one habit which has served all of you for the last, however much your age is, minus maybe 2 years. Because it was around the age of 2 that you started having a bath. It was a habit that you picked up before you spent 10,000 hours on this planet. It's a habit that didn't take you 66 days or even 21 days. It's a habit that took you 2 days. Why go far? Putting on the mask, physical distancing, this whole thing about alcohol. How long did it take us to get these habits in place? Not long. How long will it take us to regress back into old habits? Unfortunately, not long again.
Need dictated and it is instantaneous.
There you are. So how we build these habits is very important. But to understand how we are our own spokes in these habits, I'm going to relate to you a very personal story, which I discovered very recently. With these lockdowns and all, my wife is a great cook. She's always enjoyed cooking, so she is the cook. But I am the default cleaner. So mindfully, I clean the dishes. About 2 weeks ago, I started stacking up those dishes. The breakfast dishes and lunch dishes would come together, and then I would clean them after lunch. Now, since my wife does the lunch cooking before lunch, she finds the sink full of dishes, and she was getting upset. If you don't leave the sink clean, then I don't know where to wash the vegetables and all that stuff. So, a couple of weeks passed, and sometimes these things would become really hot, depending on how her mood was. You never think about me and this and that. So all these little differences, arguments that arise, they always escalate into how things have been the same way for the last 25 years and you never learn and all those things, and how miserable your life is and all that sort of stuff. Or they don't, but sometimes they do. So before this became something like that, I started attempting to remember, to be mindful about why I am doing this. Because usually I used to wash up, it takes hardly 5 minutes, And that's when I discovered this. This is, okay, you can't see it because of the chroma key, but you can make out it's a sponge. And it's a sponge with a surface here, which is a scrub surface, and a spongy surface here, which is a absorbing surface. Now this scrub surface and the spongy surface is very nice when you have to wash dirt off. But that glue with this batch of 5, I bought this packet of 5, and this batch of 5, the glue between the scrub and the sponge keeps coming off. It's not very well glued, this particular brand. So my wife said about a couple of weeks ago that if you keep this dry, don't leave it wet in the container of soap, leave it dry, then the glue will not come off as fast. And that's what I started doing 2 weeks ago. So in the night, I would squeeze it dry and put it. Now in the morning, what would happen is it was dry. I didn't want to wet it. So I left the dishes there and I wet it only once in the day for lunch. And that was the genesis of, and that's how my habits had changed pre 2 weeks, post 2 weeks, and again a few days ago when I discovered this. That little bit of glue over here was the reason for potential altercations that could lead to a divorce. What kind of sponges do you have in your organization? And I'm talking about these kind of sponges, these little factors that we don't think of until we are mindfully aware of it, until we renew the thought process of why we do what we do, until we actually go into investigating every part of that process and seeing where renewal is really required. And then creating the habits. One of the habits is now going to be to not order this brand again. It's a habit. Every time I go on Amazon, I have a habit of clicking on buy again. This time I will not click on buy again. I don't want the damn thing again. Right? And that leads to the best space that you can be in, whether it is in terms of health or well-being or finance, abundance, or maybe all the 7 aspects that you cover, Brainciti, in the 7 areas of life. What I cover in my one aspect of renewalism.com is this book Renewal, and I just thought I'd put it up over here so that it tempts all of you to check out the site and to maybe go and grab a copy, which is, like I said, absolutely free, while I invite us to open ourselves to a discussion on these aspects of the pan, the pizza, stress, and whatever we have as your experiences with habits and anything else that we can create with your experiences in life and work, and see how renewal can be applied to those things. You can go home with something to feel renewed about. Thank you, Brainciti. Thank you, Nidhi. Over to you.